All right. Hello and welcome to part two of our retrospective on the Star Wars franchise. And for part two of this retrospective, we're going to be talking about the original trilogy. And for the first film, which is A New Hope, originally titled Star Wars, um, today is actually the anniversary of the release of A New Hope. And I just wanted to get everyone's thoughts initially about how they feel about this film and see what their ratings are. So to you, Michael.
I was muted. So this is a really solid movie. It's the best one so far. I would say if I were to give it a rating, it would be about maybe a 94. I mean, it's classic. You can't go wrong with it.
Um, with me, I love this movie. It's a great introduction to the whole universe and really sets the tone for what Star Wars is. Um, Out of 10, I'd give it like an 8.5 out of 10. Not my favorite movie, but definitely up there.
Yeah. Yeah, I give it an 8.5 also. On IMDb, they have this rated at an 8.6. And then on Rotten Tomatoes, they have it at a 92%. I would, for a Rotten Tomatoes type of score, I would probably give it a 94, kind of like Michael just did. I don't think it's not my favorite of the the original trilogy. I would say my favorite is probably Strikes Back, but we'll get to that when we get to that review. But overall, this is a fantastic film, like from start to finish. But I think the best part of it is that it's the simplicity of the story. It's it's that simplicity that makes it as great as it is.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The whole farm boy to rebel hero kind of thing with Luke Skywalker is something that really gave a lot of people hope that you can come from uh, what's the lowest of the low to being a hero, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's something a lot of people resonate with too. So that's why we all love Luke Skywalker.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. By far, my favorite aspect of this movie is I mean, I guess Harrison Ford isn't like the biggest part of this film. I think he probably plays a bigger role in Strikes Back, and he has bigger scenes in that one. But I mean, anytime he's on screen, it's probably the best aspect of the movie for
Oh yeah.
me, at least.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
Alec Guinness as old Obi-Wan Kenobi is just fantastic. Like, um, I think Ewan McGregor in the prequels was a good choice of an actor to play him. Um, and I'm curious to see what they're going to do for this old Obi-Wan series where he plays Old Ben. But it's kind of funny. Alec Guinness doesn't really talk about. After the movie came out, he didn't talk much about Star Wars anymore, and I think he's just sick of it. Because he actually had people showing up at his doorstep asking him questions about the movie, and he's like, "I'm done. I'm so out.
yeah,
I don't want to talk about this movie anymore."
yeah,
Yeah, he's
yeah.
a great actor, but the fight kind of sucks. But you can forgive that.
I feel the same way. Like everyone gives the fight scenes in these Star Wars movies a lot of credit. I think the best ones are in the prequels, and you can say probably the new trilogy has some pretty good fighting, but the old trilogy, it's for the time, it's really good fighting, but
Yeah. And I think it gets better as time goes on. By Return of the Jedi, I think actually one of my favorite fights
Oh yeah.
is Vader and Luke, their last fight. But yeah, I can see how it's this original in A New Hope, the fight between Vader and Obi-Wan. It's a little slow and
It's
clunky,
clunky. You
almost
can see the wire coming
almost
up
like
Obi-Wan's arm.
yeah, almost like poor. It's like poor fencing. It's
Yeah.
very like, but at that point in time, they didn't really have an idea of how they wanted, how people would fight with these kind of weapons and stuff. So they kind of, winged it. But I mean, either way, you got the message point across, and
Yeah.
um, it's interesting. And I think there's a video on YouTube where they actually redo
I've seen
the whole
that. Yeah.
fight. I don't know if you
Yeah.
have seen it, but it's really incredible. and it's cool to see. But either way, there's a lot of significance in that fight.
Oh yeah,
With
it's just the
Ben.
actual like choreography. It's just
Yeah, yeah, it's not the best, but it's definitely a very significant fight.
Oh yeah,
You know,
it
Mhm.
doesn't it doesn't it doesn't ruin anything. It's still
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah. Recently, I think it was last night, I was actually watching THX 1138, which was George Lucas's first film. Well, not his first film. It was his. It was a student film that he made back in college, and then he adapted it into a movie where he worked with Francis Ford Coppola on it, and it was a pretty good film. It starts out with actually a Buck Rogers thing, because he was really into those old serials, those old 1930 serials. So a lot of this film, it actually harkens back to that. And even just the opening credits, the title sequence alone is a
Yeah.
tribute to those old films.
Mhm.
You can tell that he put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this whole series, and uh, it paid dividends for him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and can we talk about the opening scene of A New Hope? Like, it's one of the most iconic scenes in the whole franchise. I
Yeah.
mean, the whole like giant star destroyer chasing, the rebel cruiser, blasting at each other. The whole
It,
boarding sequence with the stormtroopers coming out and the rebels are sitting there shooting them.
yeah,
It's
and
really cool.
yeah, it's great visual storytelling too, because I mean, you really get an idea of
Yeah.
just how small the rebels are compared to the Empire.
Yeah,
Who's in charge from the
for
get-go.
sure. For sure, yeah. Especially with the presence of Darth Vader. And
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, this is the first time if you watch the films in the order that they're made, this is the first time you see him. Um, and he's just a menace on screen. I mean,
Yeah.
you can tell how much taller he is than everybody. The
Hmm.
fact that he's in the all black, which really contrasted really well with the white of the stormtroopers. You can tell, like, okay, this guy's something else here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I wanted to get your take on Darth Vader in this movie, because um, do you think that knowing his backstory from the prequels, do you think that enhances the movie in any way or subtracts from it? Because some people like ambiguity in their characters, like not
Yeah.
knowing too much about them, but
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people say that knowing his backstory makes him more of a tragic figure rather than more of an imposing force when he's around. Like, you almost feel sorry that this is what he's turned out as.
Yeah. Um, that's a really good point, and I think we're kind of in a unique situation with like growing up with the prequels. Um, However, I had seen A New Hope before they, finished the prequels, so it's kind of like, okay, I can see where your point is, where this is tragic how he turned to this point, but at the time of when I first watched A New Hope, I didn't think that yet. You know what I mean? Because I hadn't
Yeah.
seen Revenge of the Sith. That movie hadn't came out yet. So it is kind of tragic, but you still kind of fear, the character, because I think just the voice alone is like, it kind of takes away from any feeling towards
Yeah.
how this guy is, went through a lot and is suffering. But you hear that voice and you're just like, wow, that's scary. Um, James Earl Jones is he's just got a great voice. You know what I mean? It's iconic for
Yeah.
many reasons, and Vader being one of them.
Yeah.
Um,
And just imagine if they chose not to go with James Earl Jones for
I
the
know.
dubbing,
I know.
because if it was David Prowse, oh, I can't even imagine.
It just
Yeah,
doesn't fit.
no, I love seeing all the behind the scenes with David Prowse, like, because he's still saying, he's still saying his lines, and people have to. It's another testament to how good these actors are, because he's saying his lines, and he doesn't sound as menacing, but the actors have to be like portrayed that they're in fear of this character, because it's Darth Vader. He's the main villain of this film.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of how we see Vader in this film, and you compare it to like the end of Revenge of the Sith,
Mhm.
it's kind of like you I mean, there's limitations of the time period in the filmmaking, but you see that with this film, and you're kind of like, okay, this is not the same Vader at the end of Revenge of the Sith. You know,
Yeah,
in terms of how powerful he is. You know what I mean? Like, you can
yeah,
definitely see that, but that's just limitations of the filmmaking of the time.
Yeah.
yeah. And Rogue One did a pretty good job of showing just how ferocious and what a great fighter that Darth Vader turned into.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I just feel like I should mention it because it was a prequel to this film, and it actually
Yeah.
just ties directly into A New
Straight
Hope.
in. Yeah, straight
I
into
just felt
that
like I should mention
beginning scene. Yeah, for sure.
because
Yeah, it
I
ties.
actually watched it right. I watched A New Hope right after I saw Rogue One,
Mhm.
and they work so well together. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that the Princess Leia thing at the end took people out of it, and plus
That didn't bother
Grand
me.
Moff Tarkin. But I mean,
Mhm.
I think it looked fine when I was in the theater.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it looked pretty incredible. Especially Grand Moff Tarkin, they did a really good job with that. You can kind of tell a little bit more with Leia, but
Yeah.
the Grand Moff Tarkin looked exactly like Peter Cushing. Like, it was incredible.
Yeah,
I was almost like, did they bring this man back from the dead?
yeah. It was a resurrection for sure.
Yeah. Also, a unique dynamic in this new movie, in the New Hope, this movie. We can talk about the whole Grand Moff Tarkin and Vader, because there's an interesting
Oh yeah.
relationship between these two characters in this film, where it's kind of like Grand Moff Tarkin is, he's a boss to Vader. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? He's
For
his
sure.
boss for sure. And it's kind of incredible that you see like how powerful Vader is, but like this mortal man is telling him what to do, just because of his position and rank.
Hmm.
But it's really interesting to see in this movie, like this scene where they're all in the all the officers are gathered in the room talking about getting the plans back. And Vader starts, choking out one of the officers, and Grand Moff Tarkin, he puts his fist down and they're like, Vader, stop that. And
Yeah.
he does. But it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that was a great scene when he tricked Leia actually into revealing where the rebel base was, and then ended up just blowing up her planet anyway, even though she gave him what he wanted.
Yeah, pretty incredible, huh?
Yeah,
It's a pretty incredible scene. A lot of emotion behind that, but I think even more so, knowing, seeing like the prequels and understanding like, Bail Organa and her mother were on that planet, her adopted parents and all that.
yeah.
I guess it adds more gravity to the situation, like actually knowing a little more about the planet, as opposed to the audience. Then it's like, okay, this is a planet
it's just some random planet
that we've never heard of, but pretty interesting.
Yeah, so I wanted to move on to Luke Skywalker, and I wanted to get your thoughts on Luke Skywalker and Mark Hamill's acting in this film. Like, what do you guys think of Mark Hamill?
I think he does a good job in this movie. Some people complain about that one line, but other than that one line,
Tashi Station.
it's really
Get some
solid.
power
Yeah.
converters.
Yeah. Other than that, he does a really good job. I mean, there's a reason a lot of people love Luke, and it's because of Mark Hamill and the character.
Yeah.
So yeah, he does a really good job. This movie, it just has a lot of good acting in it. When you look at Cushing, Obi-Wan, forget his name, Alec Guinness,
Yeah.
Hamill. It's just
Harrison Ford.
Harrison
But I
Ford,
mean, this movie in particular for Mark Hamill was his breakout movie. This was his big break, and of course the acting's not perfect. I mean, maybe he'll even tell you that. I mean, but I mean, it's solid. I mean, it works, and he's a young kid, so like it kind of makes sense a little bit that he's a little whiny, cautious, and like, I don't want to leave. This is my home and all that kind of stuff. Like, I'm not trying to join the rebel forces.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the film does such great homages to like a lot of films. Like a lot of people call this like a ton of films in one, because it's harkening back to other films. Like there's even westerns that this one harkens back to, like The Searchers, the scene where Luke comes home and then his family's burned alive.
Mm.
Like that's a scene directly out of The Searchers,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of similar character motifs and certain scenes that harken back to other films, like even The Wizard of Oz, for instance. Like
Yeah.
when Luke and Han dress up as stormtroopers. That's like when the Scarecrow, and the Tin Man dress up as the witch's royal guards.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
infiltrate her castle. It's just like that. And
Yeah. I mean, it's natural in filmmaking to get ideas from other people, just in art in general, because this is art.
Yeah.
Filmmaking is an art, and you can see where um, a lot of the motivation and stems from other art forms. So it all
yeah,
comes together to create something new in this film, which is really fun and really unique. So he got a lot of inspiration from all these other films and made something that's his own. And now it's something that other people get their inspiration from and make their own uh, films. So it's really cool.
yeah.
It's
One thing
really
that I
neat to
have to
see.
mention is Star Wars was actually saved in editing. Like we probably wouldn't even be talking about this film today if they didn't have an amazing editor that came in and just changed the whole film.
Yeah.
Probably, and also the score. Like you can't forget the score.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
But we'll just stick to the editing right now. Did you guys know initially when they edited this film that the scenes with Luke on his home planet and stuff, those were the first scenes in the movie? Like this
Yeah.
was
Mhm.
When
it
he's
was a
like
linear
looking
story.
up at the battle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was supposed to be
Interesting.
like a linear storyline where
Yeah.
we start off with Luke on his home planet looking up at the sun and everything. Um, and
Interesting.
also the scenes with him and his friends. Like there was going to be a lot more scenes with his friend. What's his name? Justin. Um,
Is it Biggs?
yeah, Biggs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were going to add a lot more context to his relationships with people on his
But
planet.
yeah, because he just kind of shows up later in the movie out of nowhere. He's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, Biggs," and
Yeah.
you're like, "Who is that?"
Yeah, I think it works. They don't
I
need
mean,
too
it still
much
works. Yeah, it
context.
they
doesn't.
didn't need to talk about it, and I'm
It
glad
just
they
makes
didn't.
more sense, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need it, but
That's
Yeah.
interesting though. That's really interesting to see. I'm glad they didn't do that for obvious reasons. And I understand that Luke's like the main focal point of this story, but starting off the way they did kind of sets the world before the character. Does that make sense? So they set up
yeah.
the whole rebellion versus empire thing before they talk about Luke.
Yeah. So the next thing I want to get onto is the special editions and whether they enhanced the film or took you out of it in any way. Because I have to be honest, the only version of this movie that I've seen all my life is probably the special editions, which is sad.
Mm-hmm.
I think I only saw the original editions when I was a kid, and that was on VHS because that was the last one that they ever did. But
Yeah.
I mean, we sold those, so I'll never see that again.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people who complain about changing the original. Whether it adds or subtracts, I think there's points where it does both. It'll add and subtract, depending on which scene and which, edit they make.
Mhm.
But ultimately, this special edition is what George Lucas's vision really was. He was just limited at the time. You know what I mean? Some of it seems a little extra, like they didn't need to add some of this stuff. You can tell,
Yeah.
especially in Mos Eisley with the land speeder when they're moving in. There's a lot of extra clutter because they added, more creatures and stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But there's some things that I'm sure we'll talk about it in a minute. There's some things they added that kind of, I think, in my opinion, help it. For example, changing Java for continuity purposes, changing Java to the CGI slug instead of just this guy,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
also adding like in that scene as well, Boba Fett, hanging around with him. That just makes more sense, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
A couple things that I think detract is changing in the special edition. Um, Han and Greedo, when they shoot each other, it's changed to almost like no one shoots first. It's like simultaneous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in the original, it was Han who shot first.
Yeah.
Um, that I think kind of detracts from it. And here's my opinion why is it changes the character of Han Solo and
Definitely.
his growth. You know what I mean? From going in that film, from going from the guy who shoots the bounty hunter first
Yeah.
to becoming this rebel hero. You know what I mean? It changes his arc
Yeah.
Yeah.
as a character and character development that he shot, you know, I guess at the same time rather than he shot first and took, you know, took precautions.
Yeah. He's
Yeah,
supposed
it's
to be
just
like a ruthless gunslinger, you know?
yeah.
Exactly.
Having him shoot first kind of just kind of deflates that whole narrative.
Yeah.
Makes him act like he was just reacting to something to somebody that was attacking him.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes him look a little bit more innocent, but that takes away from his character. And in my opinion, I think it's a forgivable offense to change that scene, but it definitely hurts the film in some kind of way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so unnecessary. They look at him where he ends up as a hero, and they're like, well, we can't have him seen not acting as a hero, you know? So
Yeah.
they kind of try and shove what he turns into what he
Yeah.
is at the beginning. And it's just unnecessary. No, nobody complained that Han shot first. Like,
Yeah.
I don't, and they just keep changing it. They keep adding more and more to it.
Yeah, and they and it costs a lot of arguments now that they've
Yeah.
changed it. So now there's a ton of arguments for who actually shot first or whatever. At no point, whatever version you're watching, at no point does Greedo technically shoot first. It's either they shoot at the same time in the special editions or Han shoots first. So
Mhm.
just a misconception, but honestly, I don't think it, you know, changing it, in my opinion, hurt his character, his arc, and his story development
Yeah.
because it kind of shows, you know, his change, you know, in mentality.
Yeah. I
Just
gotta
being all about the money to being, you know, wanting to help the galaxy kind of thing.
Yeah. I gotta be honest about that Jabba scene though. I kind of don't like it being in this movie because it kind of just takes away the ambiguity of Jabba himself, you know. Because in these movies, he's talking about this debt he has to pay off from for Jabba,
Yeah.
and you know, even Greedo and Boba Fett bring it up at certain points,
Mhm.
and I would rather it just be ambiguous who Jabba is and what he looks like for you know, in Return of the Jedi when he's finally revealed, because it just kind of kills the whole reveal in Return of the Jedi, you know.
Yeah.
Well, if you watch it from like 1 to 6 order, they kind of already show Jabba in 1. So I guess that's why they, added it because they
Yeah.
assume people are going to watch it, not 4, 5, 6. They're going to go 1, 2,
Well,
3 through.
see, my thing is, this is the thing that was, this is why I said for continuity issues. So in that scene with the person rather than the slug, it was a man and he was Jabba. He referred to him as Jabba.
He
So that's,
calls him a wonderful human being because he was
yeah,
literally a human.
it
Not a
was in
slug.
the original, yes.
Yeah.
And he actually, that is Jabba, that person. And George Lucas never intended for him to be a person, but you know, he didn't really know what he wanted to create, what he wanted that character to be. So for continuity reasons, you know, I'd rather see the slug than this dude. You know what I mean? And it looks a little janky. You can
It does.
tell, especially when they altered like Han. You know how when he walks over his tail,
Yeah, he goes
it
like,
kind of goes like up and down,
Yeah.
and you can tell it was like it was edited significantly, but for continuity purposes, I prefer having the slug there.
Yeah.
But I can definitely see your point, for sure.
Yeah. So I feel like the next thing we should talk about is the score to this film because it's a revolutionary score for sure. Like
Excellent. 10 out of 10.
Yeah,
this, I'm not going to say this is John Williams' best work, but that's just because I feel like Strikes Back is probably his best score for for
mhm.
for all the Star Wars films.
Yeah,
I just feel like that one has the most iconic scores in it,
yeah,
in
for
my
sure. I
opinion.
think, yeah, and it's the scores that everyone recognizes, and it's the scores that are recycled and reused throughout
Yeah.
the whole, you know, Skywalker saga. So I mean, at any point in the other movies, you'll find hints of the original score. You know what I mean? If not them literally copying and pasting whole sections, if not the whole song in the other movies. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah,
So I mean, it's iconic and it's what people recognize, and just another testament why you know he's one of the greatest composers in film history. So
yeah. Now it would be a sin if we didn't talk about Carrie Fisher in this movie because she's so integral to Star Wars, and she will be missed. And I'm hoping that she's resting in peace. And but I just wanted to get your thoughts on Carrie Fisher in this movie.
um, really, 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 really awesome character, and I'm gonna tell you when people it makes me personally upset when people describe Carrie Fisher's character, Leia, as just another damsel in distress or not a strong female
It's not like
role.
that at all.
Yeah,
When people make that argument for Star Wars that there's no strong female roles, I mean, they were up in the forefront of strong female roles when this movie first came out. Like, are you kidding me? Like, she is such a strong character and an independent, female character that you can tell right from the get-go um when they when she's talking to Vader, she's,
Yep.
yeah,
standing up for himself, standing up for herself, and not, you know, telling him anything. And you can see it again when she starts talking to Grand Moff Tarkin. When she
yeah,
says, "Oh, I recognized your stench when I walked in." She's very strong and independent, um, more so than other characters in the Star Wars franchise. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Into the chute, flyboy. Someone gets
Yeah,
this
I was gonna
walking
say.
carpet out of my way. You know what I mean? Like those kind of lines. It's really what cements her character as like a strong, independent um, female lead role, and she did an incredible job. I think she's one of the most breakout characters in my opinion, and this was one of her. This was a breakout movie for her too, and it really shows.
yeah. One thing I have to mention is she has this strange accent that she has when she's doing the scene with Grand Moff Tarkin. Like she does, just her inflection, like her tone on certain things that she says. Like
Does she?
I don't know whether that was just misdirection. Like
I
if
noticed.
George Lucas didn't tell her, oh, don't use a British accent in the scene, just use
Yeah,
your normal accent. But
yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know, maybe. I mean, they made that. You can tell with all the officers that they talk with British accents.
Yeah,
Um,
I think she was probably just mocking Grand Moff Tarkin. Maybe that was
I
her
think,
mocking him.
yeah, I think so too. So they all talk like that, and I think she kind of did her own thing in a way.
Yeah,
Another reason that she's so funny and so like so strong, and like she doesn't care what people think, and that's even her as a person, not even her character as Leia. You know what I mean? That's just her as Carrie Fisher.
hmm I was always wondering this about the ending of A New Hope when he shoots the missiles into the Death Star, and I was
Mhm.
just wondering, did he use the Force to throw those in, or did he actually just are those just kind of like missile guided things?
I think
Um,
it's more the Force to sense when to shoot him. Not he didn't
yeah,
like curve him with the Force.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I think they're just guided. They're guided torpedoes, ion torpedoes. So, but when to actually shoot it, because it was such a small window. We're talking about the final battle of Yavin. So he puts up the thing, and people back on Yavin were like, "Hey, Luke, are you okay? Why'd you put up your tracker, your scanner, or whatever?" And he's like, "Yo, I got this. Don't worry about it." You
Oh,
know what I
Could you
okay.
mean?
imagine if somebody said that to you though? You're like, what are you doing? Like, put it back.
Yeah, because no normal
Yeah.
person would be able to like know when it's when the right time to lock on and shoot is. But
Okay, because I always thought it was kind of like one of those things where he kind of just forced those missiles in rather than, shooting them
It
at the
is
appropriate
kind of a
time.
weird turn. They're just going and they go like, "Phew."
yeah,
Yeah.
no, I don't think he used the force to go in. More in when, like what Michael said, when to fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. He got out of
Because they
there in
do
the blink
say
of an
it's
eye.
like, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know how he did that. Like he was still inside the trench when he fired those things. And not even just a second later, everyone's flying away from the Death
Yeah.
Star. I don't know
Well,
how he
Well,
got away so fast.
that's
I
just
think there was a
some
small jump.
yeah, and there's some movie magic.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
must be like that scene in Phantom Menace where I think it was Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan jump away from the blast doors. Remember that
Yeah, when
in
they
Phantom Menace?
sprint.
Yeah,
They
they did
Oh, the
that
sprint.
super
speed,
speed.
Yeah.
which he doesn't use later.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. There's
It's
like
probably one of those things.
yeah. Yeah.
Now, I feel like we should talk about the original casting for these
I have
characters.
one thing to say though, also. So your big super weapon is being attacked, and you only send 3 spaceships to kill these people.
I know,
That's
right?
something that always annoys me.
Yeah.
It doesn't like ruin the movie or anything, of course. But just 3 spaceships, really? Just you could overwhelm them, but just 3 ships.
They
I don't
underestimate.
get
I
it.
mean, you can tell. You can tell. I mean,
I mean, yeah,
even
gets
Grand
to-
Moff Tarkin was
yeah, he gets told
he
like,
told to
yeah,
evacuate, and he's like, "Don't worry about it.
yeah,
These guys are nothing. They're like
Yeah.
fleas."
They were a little short-handed that day.
But they
it was
also
a
didn't
holiday.
they also didn't know about that weak point. That's why the plans were so integral. They didn't actually know that there was
I
that
know,
weak point.
but just more than 3, I think.
Yeah, at least in the trench, right?
Yeah,
They send just the 3. I mean, one of them was Vader,
that's
but
true.
you think, and Vader's like one of the only people who made it out just because he was out there.
He was, yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So the next thing that I want to get onto is the original casting for a lot of these characters. Did you guys know that originally for Harrison Ford's character, um, which is Han Solo, the people that were up for it were, one was Steve Martin, the
Okay.
comedian,
Mhm.
and then you have John Travolta, and then you have Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell was
Kurt
the
Russell.
closest.
Yeah.
So, and
Interesting.
the only reason why Harrison Ford actually got the role was because during like the readings for the character, basically what they do in a lot of these sessions where they're auditioning people is they have somebody doing reactionary lines. So when they're telling somebody, when somebody's given their read of a scene, you have somebody to react to. So he's basically if he was like Luke Skywalker talking to Han Solo, Harrison Ford would be doing the Luke Skywalker role, and then they would be talking in the Han Solo role. But they didn't really understand the character all that well. But when Harrison Ford would do the line read, it worked so well. So George Lucas kind of hired him on the spot because of that. Like he just
Interesting.
liked his read a lot. The studio didn't really like that Harrison Ford was getting the role, but I mean, he kind of proved that he proved to them that he could do his thing up there.
Oh yeah, for sure. And he did such a great job. We're lucky to have the people who were casted to play these characters. We're lucky to have them.
Oh yeah.
People talk all the time about, oh, what if this person was casted? What if that person was casted?
Well, and we see it a little in Solo where, the guy who played him, he wasn't necessarily a bad actor. I think he's a fine actor. But
Yeah.
it does doesn't feel the same. You know,
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
it's not.
These
It doesn't.
characters, they've their actor, they've acted this character for the longest time, and it's all we've known. That
Yeah.
when someone else tries to fit the role, it's kind of
Mhm.
hard to see them as that character.
Yeah.
However, I did think. Side note, I did think Donald Glover did a
Oh yeah.
great Lando.
I think.
Oh, he
Yeah.
was fantastic, I thought.
But we're lucky to have the cast that we did for sure.
Yeah. A few other notes. Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia, the people that were up for those roles were the people that played in Carrie. And Carrie was a production that was just shooting right down the street from where George Lucas was going to shoot Star Wars.
Mhm.
So basically, Brian De Palma, a director that was very good friends with George Lucas, basically they they were friends for a long time. So they were auditioning each other's actors for both movies at the same time. So you had people from the Carrie cast coming over and auditioning for the Star Wars parts. And so the people that played Sue Snell and uh, Tommy Ross, those were the people that were going to play Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought I should mention it. You know.
Yeah, that's really cool. No, it's cool to talk about, but I'm glad. Like I said, I'm glad the characters that we have are the ones we got because they've
Yeah.
defined these roles and made Star Wars what it is. But it would have been interesting to see how different it would have been with other people.
Okay, guys. So let's just start with let's just end this with our recommendations. Would you recommend this film to other people? I mean, of course,
Absolutely.
everyone's probably seen it, but we got to say it.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, go see it.
This is an integral Star Wars movie. This is the first one ever put out in theaters. I mean, it really sets the tone for this whole universe. I mean, if you're gonna see a Star Wars movie, this is the one I would recommend. If you're only gonna watch one, watch this one because you can come in and not know anything and still enjoy it and have a great time watching it. You know what I mean? A lot of the other films, when you'll watch it, yeah, you'll have fun watching it, but a lot of things you'll be confused about because you need
Yeah.
to see the previous movies to actually make more sense of it. But if you're going to watch one, I recommend watching all. But if you're going to watch one, A New Hope's the way to go for sure.
Well, you can skip 2.
Yeah. This was an absolutely fantastic film. It has tremendous rewatch value. If you haven't seen it, then it's an absolute must watch. I would say mandatory. And yeah, I'd recommend it to pretty much anybody. So let's move on to our Strikes Back discussion, shall we?